Have you ever trusted someone only to realize too late that they weren't who they said they were? Maybe they smiled in your face, praised your potential, and promised loyalty. But behind your back, they undermined you, manipulated you, or used your kindness against you. If that hits close to home, this message is for you, because one of the most valuable life skills you can ever develop isn't charm, talent, or even intelligence. It's discernment, the ability to truly see someone's character before they have the chance to deceive you. And in today's world, that skill isn't just useful, it's necessary for survival. Discernment vs. preference now. I'm not talking about preference, the kind of snap judgment where you say, I just don't vibe with this person. That's surface level. That's intuition. Discernment is deeper. It's rooted in observation, pattern recognition, and a clear-eyed understanding of human nature. Because here's the hard truth. Not everyone has your best interests at heart. Some people aren't just flawed, they're malicious. Some don't just lie, they manipulate. And some don't hurt others by accident, they thrive on it. That may sound cynical, but it's not fear-based, it's reality-based. And if you can't see it, if you don't learn to recognize the signs, you'll keep inviting the wrong people into your life, mistaking them for friends, mentors, or partners. The cost of blind optimism, you might be thinking. But I like to give people the benefit of the doubt. I believe in the good in others. That's beautiful. It's noble. It's kind-hearted. But without discernment, it's also dangerous. Because unchecked optimism is not the same as wisdom. Sometimes, what we call faith in humanity is actually just emotional blindness, the kind that leaves you vulnerable to manipulation, heartbreak, and betrayal. Imagine driving a car through fog with no headlights, telling yourself, I'm sure the road ahead is clear. That's what it's like trusting without testing. And the results? You crash every time. The first step, pay closer attention. So how do you protect yourself? The first step is simple. Pay attention, not just to what people say, but to what they do. This might sound obvious, but it's one of the most overlooked principles in life. Why? Because words are easy, talk is cheap, and manipulative people, they're masters of language. They know exactly what to say to disarm you, impress you, or draw you in. They'll present themselves as generous, wise, loyal, even spiritual. But it's all part of the act. If you only listen to their words, you'll miss the truth entirely. Reliable red flag. Inconsistency, one of the most reliable red flags. That someone is operating in bad faith is inconsistency. It's when their words and actions don't match. They promise loyalty but betray you when it suits them. They speak of honesty but operate in secrecy. They call you friend, but their choices say enemy. They'll praise you in public, then sabotage you in private. They'll show up when they need something but disappear when you need support. And here's what's chilling. They count on you not noticing. They rely on the fact that you'll be too distracted, too trusting, too busy, or too emotionally attached to connect the dots. But if you begin to watch carefully, if you stop letting their words hypnotize you and instead start observing their behavior, you'll start to see a different story unfold. The power of discernment. Discernment isn't just about seeing through others. It's about seeing clearly for yourself. It gives you the power to avoid toxic relationships before they begin. Protect your peace. Build a circle of integrity and rise into the person God created you to be. Unshaken and unmanipulated. Your eyes are open, they don't close again. You'll start to spot the patterns. You'll hear the hidden motivations beneath the compliments. You'll sense when something's off even if everything looks perfect on the surface. And that clarity, that spiritual insight, That's not just emotional intelligence, it's survival wisdom. Closing this section teasing what's next, so let me ask you, have you ever overlooked the signs? Have you ever trusted someone whose actions didn't match their words? You're not alone. We've all been there. But the difference between staying stuck and stepping into freedom is the decision to start seeing clearly. And that's exactly what we'll explore in the next section. Because the moment you learn to recognize inconsistency and trust the evidence over the excuses, you begin to take back your power. You begin to protect your purpose. You begin to attract what's aligned and reject what's toxic. And you start living not just with hope, but with wisdom. Once you begin to see the cracks in someone's words, the inconsistencies between what they say and what they do, you start awakening your discernment. But discerning someone's character goes even deeper. There's one specific test that reveals more about a person's soul than almost anything else. How someone treats those who can do nothing for them. This is one of the most telling indicators of a person's true nature. It's easy to be polite to someone who holds power over you. It's easy to be kind when there's something to gain: status, money, opportunity, praise. But what happens when there's nothing to earn? No reward, no recognition, no social points. That's when a person's real character shows. Watch closely. How do they treat the waitress at a restaurant? How do they speak to the janitor in their building? How do they respond to someone who has no influence, no title, no leverage? A person who is cruel to the powerless isn't just rude, they're revealing something broken and dangerous inside their soul. And here's the warning: that cruelty will never stay contained. Today, it's the server or the assistant. Tomorrow, it could be you. Because toxic behavior doesn't isolate, it spreads. And if you allow yourself to get too close, you'll eventually become a target. The tools of toxic people: deception and manipulation. Let's talk about one of the most dangerous traits of harmful individuals: deception. These people don't dominate through force. They dominate through subtlety. They manipulate, they deceive. They twist the truth just enough to make you question yourself. And the terrifying part, many of them are highly skilled at it. They've spent years, sometimes their entire lives, perfecting the art of distortion. They don't yell, they don't rage. They whisper lies into your perception until your sense of reality starts to bend. Gaslighting, psychological control in disguise. You've probably heard the term before, gaslighting. But what exactly does it mean? Gaslighting is a manipulation tactic where someone makes you doubt your own reality. They distort facts, deny things they said, rewrite events, and before long, you start questioning your own memory, judgment, even your emotions. It's psychological warfare, and it's incredibly effective. Why? Because once someone controls the way you see, they control the way you respond. They make you feel like the aggressor, even when they're the one doing harm. They tell you you're overreacting when you're simply responding to disrespect. They frame your boundaries as being dramatic or too sensitive. Over time, you begin to second-guess your instincts. You start asking, am I crazy? Am I the problem? You're not. That confusion, that fog, it's intentional. How to defend yourself against manipulation. So, what can you do? Step 1, trust your instincts. If something feels off, even if you can't logically explain it, pay attention. Your subconscious picks up on subtle cues: tone, timing, micro-expressions, patterns of behavior long before your conscious mind can make sense of them. Don't ignore those gut feelings. Don't talk yourself out of what your soul already knows. Step 2, ask yourself, do I feel clear or confused around this person? This is huge. Healthy people bring clarity. You know where you stand. You feel safe to ask questions. Communication is open, honest, and direct. Toxic people, on the other hand, create a fog. One day they're affectionate, the next cold and distant. One moment they praise you, the next they humiliate you, and you're left spinning, asking, did I do something wrong? You didn't. The confusion is the manipulation. Step 3. Observe how they handle truth. This is the ultimate test. Don't bring up a concern. Watch what happens. Healthy people might feel uncomfortable, but they'll eventually reflect. They'll apologize. They'll own their mistakes. Manipulative people, they'll explode. They'll deflect. They'll twist the narrative so completely that by the end of the conversation you're the one apologizing. Sound familiar? They avoid responsibility at all costs. They rewrite the script. They punish you for daring to tell the truth. That's not disagreement. That's emotional control. What to do when you see the pattern? So, what do you do when you recognize this behavior? You distance yourself. You set boundaries not to punish them, but to protect your peace, your clarity, and your sanity. And here's something important. Don't try to argue with them. You won't win. You can't reason with someone who's committed to avoiding the truth. You can't fix someone who doesn't want to change. And you can't help someone who's thriving in the very chaos they create. The trap of believing you can save them. This is where many good-hearted people get stuck. You think, if I just love them harder, if I explain things better, if I give them another chance. But here's the truth you need to hear. People don't change unless they want to. And manipulators rarely want to. Why? Because their tactics work. They get what they want. They hold control. They live in a system that benefits them, and they have no reason to leave it. Your job is not to rescue someone who is drowning others to stay afloat. Your job is to recognize the pattern, protect your soul, and build relationships with people who give life, not take it. Protect your future by protecting your peace. Of people you allow into your life will either drain you, distract you, or develop you. You get to choose. Your future depends on who you trust, who you keep close, and who you walk away from. So choose wisely, because not everyone deserves access to your time, energy, or heart. Once you begin recognizing patterns of manipulation, those who gaslight, twist truth, and create emotional chaos, the next step is protecting your environment. Because here's the hard truth. The company you keep determines the direction of your life. The company you keep. A hidden cost. You can have dreams, discipline, and drive. But if you allow the wrong people into your inner circle, you will pay the price emotionally, mentally, spiritually, even physically. That's why you must remain vigilant, stay discerning, and most importantly, never ignore what your intuition, your God-given gut is telling you. There's a specific trait you must learn to detect early on. A behavior that, if ignored, will cost you years of peace and clarity. The most damning trait: avoiding responsibility. Of the clearest red flags of a toxic person is this: they refuse to take responsibility, not just for small things, but for their entire life. Every misstep, every failure, every broken relationship, it's always someone else's fault. They live in a state of constant deflection. They point fingers, they shift blame, they rewrite events in their favor. And if you don't recognize this early, you may find yourself emotionally entangled in someone else's mess, fighting battles that were never yours, explaining problems you didn't cause, and carrying guilt that was never meant for your shoulders. Nothing is more exhausting or soul-draining than trying to reason with someone who is emotionally allergic to accountability. They thrive in enabling environments. People rarely operate alone. They surround themselves with enablers, people who are willing to carry their burdens, excuse their failures, and clean up their messes. But here's the shocking twist. They don't target weak people. They target good people, compassionate, empathetic, responsible individuals who believe in fairness and second chances. Why? Because bad people need good people to survive. They need your emotional labor. They need your forgiveness. They need your willingness to understand them so they can avoid ever understanding themselves. If you're the kind of person who sees the best in others, who gives grace freely, who believes everyone deserves a second chance, then you are exactly who a manipulator seeks out. How you become their shield, you'll start making excuses for them. They've been through a lot. They had a rough childhood. They just need more time. And while you're busy empathizing, they're busy using your grace as a shield against reality. They let you absorb the consequences they refuse to face. They hide behind your goodness while continuing to avoid growth. Resentment, the rot beneath the surface. And now let's take it a step deeper. What happens when someone refuses to take responsibility for their life day after day, year after year? They become resentful. And resentment is one of the most toxic emotional states a human being can live in. Why? Because when someone blames others for all their pain, their failures, and their missed opportunities, they begin to believe that the world is against them. This belief fuels entitlement and rage. And once that mindset takes root, they begin to justify all kinds of destructive behavior. They manipulate, they sabotage, they lie, they cheat. They tear down others, all while believing they're the victim. They destroy friendships. They ruin workplace, relationships. They damage families, and in their mind, they're not wrong. They're righteously angry at a world that, in their view, owes them something. The spiritual cost of avoiding responsibility is the tragedy. The more they deflect, the worse their life becomes. Why? Because life is already hard when you do take responsibility. But when you reject accountability, when you push away every opportunity to grow, life doesn't just become hard, it becomes unbearable. Without ownership, there's no learning. Without learning, there's no progress. And without progress, there's only repeated pain, disguised as bad luck or other people's fault. Every time someone avoids blame, they lose a little more control over their life. Every time they shift responsibility, they surrender another piece of their potential. What this means for you is someone trying to build a life of clarity, strength, and peace. You must protect yourself from these people. It's not your job to fix them. It's not your burden to carry the consequences of someone else's irresponsibility. You were not created to be a permanent emotional crutch for someone who refuses to walk on their own. Just uncovered how toxic people avoid responsibility and live in cycles of blame. But there's another mindset even more dangerous than irresponsibility. It's when someone begins to believe they're a permanent victim of life. And if you're not careful, their worldview can start to shape yours. The victim mentality, a subtle, self-destructive trap. You've heard the phrases before. I can't succeed, the system is rigged. I'm not happy because everyone else keeps dragging me down. What these statements have in common is powerlessness. And here's the scary part. Every time someone says them, they reinforce that helplessness. They build mental walls around themselves and trap their potential inside. They tell themselves a story where they're not the main character but a puppet, a pawn in someone else's game, a leaf blown by the winds of fate. And once you believe you have no control, you start living like you don't. You stop trying, you stop growing, you give up your power before the world even takes it from you. Manipulators love a powerless mind, and guess who benefits most from this mindset? Manipulative people. They want you to believe you're stuck, cursed, or dependent. They want you to think life happens to you, not through you. Because the moment you reclaim your power, the moment you say, "This is my life, I take responsibility, I can change," you become immune to their control. They can't guilt you, they can't shame you, they can't pull your strings, because you're no longer playing their game. How to protect yourself from victim-minded peer please. So how do you avoid falling into their narrative? Step 1. Pay attention to patterns. If someone always has a reason why life is unfair to them, red flag. If nothing is ever their fault and everyone else is to blame, you need to be careful, because eventually you'll become their next scapegoat. Step 2. Hold people accountable. When someone rewrites history, changes details to suit their ego, or refuses to take ownership, don't let it slide. Even if you don't confront them out loud, confront it in your own mind. If you don't, the gaslighting will seep in. You'll start questioning your own memory, your own judgment, your own sanity. And that's exactly what they want. A confused version of you is easier to control. Step 3. Take radical responsibility for your own life. This one's tough, but it's life-changing. Don't wait for permission. Don't wait for fairness. Don't let someone else's excuses become yours. Because here's a hard truth. The only thing more dangerous than someone who refuses responsibility is becoming that person yourself. And if you let these voices shape your reality for too long, that's exactly what can happen. The silent killer. In Vino, let's talk about a trait that hides in plain sight. It's subtle, it's quiet, but it destroys relationships, poisons environments, and turns good people into enemies. That trait is envy. It doesn't always scream. It doesn't always come with a warning label. Sometimes envy comes disguised as a concerned friend, a helpful colleague, or even a supportive family member. But underneath the surface, envy isn't just jealousy, it's resentment. It's "I don't just wish I had what you have, I believe you don't deserve it." And that belief is dangerous. When envy turns to sabotage, envy by itself might stay internal. But when it turns into resentment, it becomes a weapon. It leads people to undermine your goals, discourage your dreams, sabotage your relationships. Why? Because in their mind, your success highlights their failure. And instead of growing, they want to pull you back down. The envy you don't see but feel. Here's how it often looks. You share an exciting idea or goal with someone close to you. You're hopeful, passionate, energized. And their response, "That's a really competitive field. Are you sure? I just don't want you to be disappointed." You know most people fail at that, right? They say it like they're protecting you, but they're not. They're projecting their fear onto your future. And here's the key question to ask yourself. Would they say the same thing if it were their dream, their child, their opportunity? If the answer is no, then it's not realism, it's envy wearing a mask. Why envy and lack of accountability go hand in hand? Let's connect the dots. People who never take responsibility for their lives eventually run out of people to blame. So they start resenting the people who are actually succeeding. They think, "If I can't have it, you shouldn't either. If my life is hard, your success must be luck or privilege. You're where you are because life gave you something it didn't give me." And that resentment begins to grow into bitterness. And bitterness always seeks company. They'll try to bring you down, because if they can't rise, they'll make sure you don't either. The solution: awareness and distancia. So how do you protect yourself? Stay aware. Envy doesn't always announce itself. but it shows up in patterns. People who only criticize your progress, people who subtly downplay your wins, people who suddenly become distant when you're doing well. Distance yourself. You don't need to fight. You don't need to prove. You just need to protect your peace. Envy isn't always loud. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it lingers in the room without a name. But left unchecked, it doesn't stay quiet, it turns into something far more dangerous. Sabotage. When envy turns into action, you see. When a person lives with a victim mentality long enough, resentment starts to build. And when that resentment simmers without being addressed, it doesn't just stay inside, it leaks out. It leaks into conversations, through passive-aggressive remarks. It shows up in the form of sarcasm when you share your success. It hides behind silence when you need support the most. You might notice a sudden distance, a lack of encouragement, or the subtle dismissal of your dreams. But it doesn't always stay subtle. Sometimes it escalates. They might spread rumors behind your back. Try to discredit your reputation, undermine your work, turn others against you, all while smiling to your face. And if you're not paying attention, you might start to internalize their insecurity. Don't let their doubt become your belief. When someone envious plants seeds of doubt, it can creep in slowly. Maybe they're right. Maybe I'm not ready for this. Maybe I should pull back, play it safe. But don't let that happen. That's exactly what they want. Because if you shrink, they don't have to grow. If you play small, they don't have to face their own stagnation. If you stop reaching for more, they can stay comfortable in their mediocrity. Let that sink in. Your growth threatens their comfort. Flip the perspective. What if the envy is yours? Now let's flip the lens, and this part might sting a little. Ask yourself honestly, have you ever felt a twinge of envy towards someone else's success? Have you ever caught yourself thinking, they don't deserve that, or why them, and not me? If so, you're not alone. It happens. But here's the key. You can't let envy stay. Envy is poison not to others, but to you. It eats away at joy. It warps your thinking. And if you don't address it, it will slowly destroy you from the inside out. So what do you do instead? Learn. Instead of asking why them, ask, what did they do that I haven't? Study their habits. Observe their consistency. Understand their discipline, their mindset, their sacrifices. Use their success as fuel, not as fire to burn bridges. Surrounded by envy, it's time to choose now. Let's say you're on the receiving end. You're surrounded by people who subtly resent your progress, undermine your dreams, or mock your ambition in quiet ways. You have a decision to make. You can shrink yourself to make them feel safe, or you can rise anyway. There is no middle ground. Spend enough time around envy, and you will start to absorb its mindset. You'll become hesitant, fearful, even ashamed of your own growth. And that is the fastest way to sabotage your own future. See it for what it is and reclaim your power. Remember what we said earlier, bad people rarely come with a warning label. But if you slow down and observe, patterns emerge. And once you recognize envy for what it really is, a reflection of someone else's insecurity, not a measure of your worth, you take back your power. You stop needing validation from those who secretly want you to fail. You stop explaining yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. And most importantly, you stop feeling guilty for outgrowing those who refuse to grow with you. Your success is not a threat, it's a reflection of discipline. Let's be clear. Your success has nothing to do with them. It's about you. It's about how far you're willing to go, how much you're willing to sacrifice, and how deeply you're willing to grow. If someone else can handle that, it's not your burden to carry. You don't owe anyone your smallness. You don't need to dim your light so they can feel comfortable in the dark. There's too much at stake. Not all struggles are innocent, no. Let's clarify something. We all have moments where we struggle to see someone else's perspective. That's human. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about people who consistently and deliberately ignore how their actions affect others. People who, when you're in pain, don't offer help but instead see your suffering as opportunity. And if you don't recognize that pattern, you'll make excuses for it. You'll convince yourself that they didn't mean it, or worse, that you somehow deserved it. Tying it back to awareness, this brings us full circle to awareness. The ability to spot the warning signs, to catch the red flags early before you're entangled, to say, no, this isn't normal, this isn't healthy, this isn't love or friendship, it's control. Because here's the truth. People who lack empathy don't just hurt others by accident. They do it systematically, without remorse, and often without ever being confronted because they hide behind charm, flattery, or familiarity. Once you recognize that some people will never celebrate your growth, the next realization is even heavier. Some don't just resent you, they'll actively try to break you. And the most dangerous ones, they do it without remorse because they lack one critical thing: empathy. What happens when someone lacks empathy? You might assume that deep down, everyone feels guilt. Everyone feels bad when they lie or hurt someone. But that's not always true. There are people who don't experience guilt or shame the way decent, emotionally healthy people do. They don't feel the moral weight of their choices. If they lie to you and get caught, they won't feel regret. They'll feel inconvenience, maybe, annoyed but not sorry. And that's where the danger begins. These people twist reality not to protect themselves, but to control you. The psychological trap, making you doubt yourself. Have you ever expressed your pain to someone and had them look at you like you're the problem? You say, what you said really hurt me, and their response is a blank stare or worse. You're being desensitive. That's not misunderstanding. That's a tactic. It's designed to slowly train you to doubt your own feelings, to question your perception of reality. Because once they can control your emotions, they can control your decisions. And when they control your decisions, they control you. Key point 3. Lack of accountability. Let's connect this to the next trait: the refusal to take responsibility. Think about it. If someone lacks empathy, why would they care about the consequences of their actions? If they hurt someone and feel nothing internally, why would they ever take accountability? They won't. Instead, they'll twist the narrative. You're too dramatic. That's not what I meant. Why do you always make things such a big deal? Do you see the pattern? This isn't just denial, it's emotional manipulation dressed as self-defense. And here's why it matters. Accountability is the foundation of personal growth. If someone can't admit they're wrong, they can't improve. And if they can't improve, they become stagnant or worse. They descend into deeper patterns of toxicity, feeding envy and resentment over time. Key point 4. Envy and resentment in the empathy-lacking personality. Do people who lack empathy often carry such deep resentment? Because if they're not responsible for their failures, someone else must be. And that someone is often the person succeeding in front of them. They blame others for their unhappiness, lack of success, broken relationships, missed opportunities, and over time, their bitterness turns into resentment, especially toward those who have what they secretly want. Have you ever celebrated a win only to be met with coldness, subtle jabs, or guilt-tripping? That's not coincidence. That's resentment. It's the quiet message that says, you don't deserve what I couldn't. achieve. When resentment becomes sabotaging, here's where it gets darker. Resentment doesn't always stay passive. Sometimes it acts. Snide comments to undermine your confidence, subtle efforts to sabotage your progress, gossip behind your back, taking credit for your work, turning others against you. Because they lack empathy, they don't feel bad about it. In their mind, they're justified. They've convinced themselves you're arrogant, you've had it easier, you owe them something, and now you're the target. So what do? At this point, you might be thinking, okay, I get it. There are toxic people like this out there. But what can I do to protect myself? Let's talk about that, because this is the most important part. The final key point: how to protect yourself. These people will drain your energy, steal your time, and damage your confidence if you let them. They will shrink your spirit, just so they don't have to face their own reflection. So what's the first step? Walk away, not just physically, but mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. Stop waiting for them to wake up. Stop hoping they'll change. Stop bending over backward for people who have already shown you who they are. Because the truth is, they won't change. At least, not unless they choose to. And people like this, they rarely do. Believe what you see. If someone consistently shows you a lack of empathy, a refusal to take responsibility, a pattern of resentment toward your growth, believe them. Don't get stuck in the illusion of potential. Once you believe what you see, once you stop making excuses for their behavior, something amazing happens. You create space, and in that space, better people begin to appear. Surround yourself with strength. You start attracting people who lift you up instead of tear you down. Celebrate your wins instead of resenting them out. Their actions instead of blaming you for this. This is where true transformation begins. Because when you surround yourself with people who value growth, truth, and responsibility, you don't just heal from toxicity, you rise above it. You reclaim your peace. You rediscover your power. And you build a life rooted in authenticity, clarity, and strength. When you finally distance yourself from toxic, manipulative, empathy-lacking people, something remarkable begins to happen. The energy you once spent explaining yourself, apologizing for growing, trying to fix people who never wanted to be fixed, all that energy is suddenly yours again. Redirect your energy, reclaim your life instead of walking on emotional eggshells. Instead of constantly trying to repair what someone else keeps breaking, you begin using that strength to build. You invest in your passions. You nurture real connections. You create the life you were meant to live. And here's the truth. When you stop trying to fix broken people, you stop feeling broken yourself. But let's be honest, it's not easy. This path requires courage, walking away from people who drain you, especially when they're close to you, is painful. Choosing yourself over their chaos might make you feel guilty, even isolated for a time. It requires courage to say, this relationship doesn't serve my growth anymore. It requires self-respect to believe, I deserve more than someone who only shows up to take. And yes, it may require enduring some loneliness, because there will be a season, a gap between letting go of the wrong people and attracting the right ones. But in that space, something powerful begins to grow. It might feel empty at first, like silence after the storm. But give it time. In that silence, you'll hear your own voice again. In that stillness, you'll rediscover who you are without all the noise. And slowly, something new will take root. Clarity, peace, strategizing begin to live. Not for approval, but for alignment. You'll make decisions not out of fear, but out of conviction. And most importantly, you'll stop asking, what do they think of me? And start asking, what do I know about myself? The real lesson here is what it all comes down to. Your life is too short. Your potential is too great. And your peace is too precious to waste it on people who do not care about you. So, stop negotiating with toxicity. Stop shrinking to keep others comfortable. Stop hoping that someone will change who has shown you again and again that they won't. You don't owe anyone access to your energy just because they're familiar. You don't have to feel guilty for protecting your mind, your heart, or your future. Set ruthless boundaries. Live with relentless purpose. Be ruthless with your boundaries, not because you're cold, but because you're finally warm to yourself. Be disciplined with your energy, not because you're selfish, but because you've been drained for too long. And above all, be unwavering in your commitment to one thing: becoming the best version of yourself. Not for validation, not for applause, but because that's what your soul came here to do. Final words for the viewer: if this message spoke to you, don't just keep it in your heart, act on it. Let today be the line in the sand. Walk away from what wounds, hold on to what heals, and build the life that deep down you've always known you were meant to live. Would you like me to now help craft a strong call to action outro to invite viewers to like, subscribe, and reflect in the comments?